All right, so here we go. Let's start our next lesson. And you guys will see the warm-up questions. And I want you to factor, just like we did in the whole last unit. Go ahead and factor these 4 questions. Hit pause. When you are done, then go ahead and hit play again, and I will have the answers there. Okay, so hit pause now, please. All right, so there are my answers. I will circle them so that you can find them very quickly. Okay, there's that one. This should have been a nice review since we just got done with factoring in our last unit. So hopefully you guys did okay with that. If not, again, hit pause and fix the ones that you have wrong. Otherwise, we're going to move on to the next page. So at the top of the next page here, it says the zero product property. And so what do we know about what happens when we multiply by 0? Well, we know we get 0. So if you take a look, it says on here that if you have any numbers, A and B, right? A is a number, B is a number. If A times B equals 0, right? Then that means either A had to be 0 or B has to be 0. One of the two, or maybe even both, have to be 0. This is the rule we have to follow. We need all of these problems to always be equal to 0. Okay? In order for us to solve using factoring, we have to always be equal to 0. So take a look at this problem here. So that means that either this, which is our A, is equal to 0, or this one, which is B, has to equal 0. Based off of the property up above. So if that's the case, that means that x plus 1 has to be 0, or x minus 5 has to be 0. So this actually becomes easy because now those are just one-step equations, and I just solve for x. So subtract 1 over, and I get x equals -1. And on the other one, I add 5 over. And I get x equals 5. Now we could go back and plug this in and check it to see if it actually does work. So check, okay? So here's my check. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the -1 and I'm going to plug it in. -1 plus 1 times the other factor, which is -1 minus 5. So -1 plus 1 is 0. 0 times -6 equals 0. Sure enough, it worked. What if I plug the 5 in? Maybe it doesn't work that one. Maybe it doesn't work there. So I plug in the 5. And so I go, all right, 5 plus 1 times 5 minus 5. So here I have 6 times 0, and 6 times 0 is 0. So sure enough, it worked for both of them. Both of these factors that I found, or my answers, my solutions, work. So let's keep going, okay? Let's keep going. So for this next one here, this is my A, this is my B. So I'm going to just say, well, 2x plus 3 has to equal 0, or it's the x minus 4 that had to equal 0. So solve for x on both of those. So I will subtract 3 on the first equation. So I have 2x equals -3. Divide by 2, and x is equal to -3 over 2, or of course some of you guys like those decimal things, -1.5. The other one, pretty straightforward, add 4 to the other side, and so x equals 4. You'll notice that we get 2 solutions every time. Why am I getting 2 solutions every time? Because I have 2 factors. 2 factors means I should get 2 solutions. All right, let's try letter C. So letter C, again, the first factor could be the one that made the whole thing 0. And the second factor could also have made the whole thing 0. So I'm going to solve for y on each of these. So subtract 1 on the first one. And we have 2y is equal to -1. Divide by 2. And y is equal to -1/2. Or I subtract 14 on my second factor, and I get y is equal to -14. Again, 2 solutions because I have 2 factors. If there had been 3 factors, how many solutions do you think we're going to get? Exactly, we're going to get 3. I would like you to do letter D on your own. All right, so go ahead, hit pause. When you hit play again, you will see my solution. Go ahead and hit pause now, please. All right, so there are my solutions. Of course, you guys know me. I would much rather have my fraction form, because most of you probably, if you did change 2/7 over to a decimal, you don't realize that it is actually a repeating digit. All 6 digits repeat, and it's just kind of hard to see on a calculator, which is, again, just leave it in fraction form. Same thing for 4/5. I would just leave it that way, but if you wanted to, I suppose you could change it over, but you know me, I don't like those. All right, let's move on. Next page. All right, so at the top of the page, there's nothing written up there, but I do want you guys to know what's going on. So let's jot down a little piece of information. You guys need to understand that what we're mostly going to work with is what is called standard form. Standard form says that you will see an equation that's ax squared plus bx plus c. Remember, we saw stuff like this all in the whole last unit. So now what we're going to do is we're going to be able to take this and solve it, but it has to equal 0. For us to change that standard form, we have to be able to, to be able to solve it, we have to change it first to factored form. Must change to factored form. Okay, you must. So all of these problems from here on out, you have to first convert it over to factored form, right? X plus A, X plus B, whatever those numbers are. And of course, it's still going to be equal to 0. So let's take a look at my first example. M squared minus 5m minus 14 equals 0. So first thing I have to do, factor it. The good news is, since this coefficient is 1, we can go straight to the answer. So we're going to have negative 14 and negative 5. Well, what two numbers make that happen? Negative 7 and positive 2. Because of the 1 out front, I can go straight to m minus 7 and m plus 2. Piece of cake. Now I do like I did on the whole last section. We've just added one step. That's all we've done. M minus 7 equals 0 or m plus 2 equals 0. Solve for m on both of these. And you got your 2 answers because there were 2 factors. All right, let's try the next one. We have p squared plus p minus 20 equals 0. So ask yourself, hey self, what's negative 20 and 1 apart? Oh, that's going to be a positive 5 and a negative 4, right? Positive 5, negative 4. So again, because this is a coefficient of 1, I can go straight to the answer. P plus 5 is one factor. P minus 4 is the other factor. It's equal to 0. Each factor now gets equaled to 0 because one of them must be a 0. Actually, they both end up being zeros. And we subtract 5. And we get p equals negative 5, or we can add 4, and we get p is equal to 4. There are your 2 solutions. All right. Now, this next one, we do have to split the middle term. Okay. We do have to split the middle term. So let's see here. 2 times 18 is 36. And they are 15 apart. So I'm like, well, 1 and 36. Oops, 1 and 36, or 2 and 18. No, 3 and 12. Oh, negative 3, negative 12 makes negative 15 and a positive 36, so it's negative 3 and negative 12. All right, because there is a 2 out front, we can't just go straight to the answer. We have to actually split the middle term. So we have 2a squared minus 3a minus 12a plus 18 equals 0. So we have an extra step. All right, what did the first 2 terms have in common? They've got an a. And what do I have left? 2a minus 3. What do my last 2 terms have in common? Notice this is negative and that one's positive, but I need it to be the opposite, positive, negative. So I'm going to factor out a negative. I'm going to factor out negative 6. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, negative 6. Yeah, negative 6. Think again. All right, and so I have 2a minus 3. Awesome. And that's all equals 0. So my first factor is a minus 6. My second factor is 2a minus 3. Set each one equal to 0. So a minus 6 equals 0, or the 2a minus 3 has to equal 0, and solve. Solve for a. The first one is 6. The other one, add 3 to the other side. You have 2a is equal to 3. Divide by 2. And a is equal to 3 over 2, or those icky decimals. So sure enough, I've got 2 answers. All right, if you need to, hit pause, look them over, see what I did, figure out how I got those answers. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going. Next page. All right, so what are the solutions for x squared plus 14x equals negative 49? If you paid attention to what I said earlier, you know that the only way we can solve these is it must equal 0. Must equal 0. We cannot solve it if it doesn't. So if that's the case, that means I need to add 49 to the other side. All right, that zeroes that out. Sure enough, x squared plus 14x plus 49 equals 0. You're like, oh, piece of cake. Now, some of you might realize there's a shortcut. Others of you may not. So if you don't see the shortcut, you're like, hey, what makes 49 and 14? Most of you are like, oh, it's 7. Also, there's a group of you who goes, nah, this is a perfect square trinomial. Perfect square trinomial. And you had memorized your perfect square trinomials and knew that this became x plus 7 quantity squared is equal to 0. Okay? Now, if you see that, if you see the perfect square trinomial, you're going to learn how this tomorrow's or the next lesson is going to work. But you can, what's the opposite of square? Square root. Square root both sides in this case. The square root of x plus 7 quantity squared is just x plus 7. The square root of 0 is 0. Subtract 7. And you find out that x is equal to negative 7. You're like, Mrs. Hoekstra, you said there was going to be 2 solutions. But with a perfect square trinomial, we only had one factor. Now, if you had not done it that way, and you're like, well, I actually have x plus 7 times x plus 7, because I didn't catch that it was a perfect square trinomial, then you would have said, oh, x plus 7 is equal to 0, or x plus 7 is equal to 0, and you still would have gotten the exact same answer I did, right? Because you'd be like, oh, look at that. X equals negative 7 both times. I don't need to write it twice. So if you don't catch that it's a perfect square trinomial, it's okay. But if you do, you actually are jumping ahead a day and understanding how the next one's going to work. So if I give you x squared plus 2ax plus a squared equals 0, or x squared minus 2ax plus a squared equals 0, why did I only have one solution? It's a perfect square trinomial. Perfect square trinomial. So it only has one factor. Because if we're talking about a square, right? Let's think about this. We're talking about a square. What do you know about squares? Yeah, 90 degrees. I know, you guys always tell me that one. That doesn't help me with this problem. We know that the sides are the same, right? So this side here has to be the same as that one there. They have to be the same. So that means I'm only going to get one factor. Okay? All right, next page. You are constructing a frame for a rectangular photo shown. You want the frame to be the same width all the way around and the total area of the frame and photo to be 315 square inches. What should the outer dimensions of the frame be? Okay. What should we know? What do we know? I want you guys to pause a moment, write down things that you know, and then see how your answer compares to mine. So you should know that the side is 11 plus 2x, because there's two x's here, right? Two parts I don't know. And then the top, or the bottom, is 17 from the photo, plus the two x's that I don't know on the sides. So I do know area of a rectangle is length times width. Well, here's my length, here's my width, so I'm just going to plug it in. I also know that area is 315, right? Given to me up here. So I'm going to say that 315 is equal to length, 17 plus 2x, times width, which is 11 plus 2x. You're like, oh, this is awesome. Not quite yet, because remember, it also has to still equal 0. Oof. So in order for me to do that, I actually have to FOIL this problem out. Remember FOIL? Or you could use the box method if you would rather. Okay? So you're going to have to FOIL that out. If you need to, hit pause and do that FOIL. And I will wait for you. So when you FOIL it, you should get 4x squared plus 56x plus 187. Remember, this has to equal 0. So that means I've got to subtract the 315 over to the other side. So now I have 0 is equal to 4x squared plus 56x minus 128. Now I have to factor that. You're like, whoa, these numbers are huge. I wonder if there's anything that goes into all three of those. And the answer is, of course, yes. So we have 0 is equal to, what goes into all three? 4. Life is good. X squared plus 14x minus 32. So now I just have to factor that. So let's see, what makes negative 32 and positive 14? It would happen to be 16 and negative 2. That makes life easy because I can go straight to the answer since that coefficient is 1. So I have 0 is equal to 4, which I really don't care about, times x plus 16, and another factor is x minus 2. At this point, I'm going to look at these and set them both equal to 0. X plus 16 must be the 0, because obviously 4 isn't 0. And x minus 2 has to be 0. So I get x equals negative 16 or x equals positive 2. One of those two is actually wrong. Which problem is wrong? Well, we're talking about length. Can't have a negative length. Right? Can't have negative length. So, I can spell length. Since we can't have negative length, the answer must be x equals 2 centimeters. And there is your answer. Okay? So what should the outer dimensions of your frame be? So let's take this answer. 11 plus 2 times 2, right? Or 11 plus 4, also known as 15. And the other one is 17 plus 2 times 2, or 17 plus 4, which is 21. The two dimensions are 21 by 15. All right, so that is all I have. At this point now, you guys can start doing your homework. All right, I will record my answers and put them in Google Classroom so that you guys can see and check your answers again tomorrow when you guys come back into class. and you will have another lesson waiting for you in Google Classroom. See you guys on Monday.